legislature.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to let Bill go first this time because I went first last month. So
That's not
no,
fair.
that's not true. I
No,
did
you
it
didn't.
2
You weren't
months
here.
ago.
Jump right here.
Last month.
Well, in any event, let me start off by saying again, Jane and I, and also Commissioner Briggs, who filled in last month, have all appreciated this opportunity to share with you what's been going on in the legislature from the perspective not only of the city of Great Falls, but Cascade County as well. Because as some of you who are here who've heard our previous presentations, there are a number of issues that come before the legislature, this year being no exception, that are critical to the ultimate success of the operation of local government in your community. And recognizing that you've got a full agenda tonight, Jane and I are not going to touch on every particular issue of concern to us again, but we are going to hit a few highlights of some things. And I'm going to start out by mentioning again the whole subject of tax increment financing, which is an issue not only of concern to the city, but to our friends in Cascade County as well. One of our biggest fears going into the session this year was that we would once again face legislation from a number of different quarters that could potentially impinge or really negatively impact the ability of cities and counties to utilize tax increment financing as a tool to promote economic development and to resolve urban blight issues in our communities. Fortunately, because of a lot of the legwork that was done during the interim, where we worked with the legislature's Interim Revenue and Transportation Committee, we were able to raise the level of education about how important this tool is to local governments. And as a result, the bills that came forward during the session, in one instance, were not as bad as we thought they were going to be, and in the instance of the one that we thought was very problematic, we were ultimately successful in convincing legislators on both sides of the aisle in the Senate Tax Committee to simply table that bill and let it die an appropriate time. But I do want to mention the one bill that is on its way to the governor is a proposal that Senator Hoeven carried. And Senator Hoeven was very gracious. He worked with local government officials right from the get-go in terms of what he wanted to do with respect to tax increment financing. We did have some disagreements along the way. They were all civil. They were mainly us having to re-explain for his benefit and those of his supporters. He had some good ideas, but potentially some of them could have had a very negative impact on the operation of existing tax increment finance districts. But again, he was very open to suggestions, and again, all of the changes that were adopted met with unanimous support from all of the different constituent groups. So I publicly want to acknowledge Senator Hoeven for working with us on that, and he's to be commended for the work that he did with us on that. One other good thing that's come out of the session is that you will see, again, depending on the governor's approval, which I anticipate, approval for one piece of legislation that will provide us some assistance in the area of housing, particularly affordable housing. In prior sessions of this group, you've heard me talk about what was called House Bill, or what is House Bill 16 by Representative Fern from Whitefish, which is a proposal for utilizing some of the coal tax trust fund monies as backing for loan programs for certain kinds of affordable housing. That bill did receive a lot of support on both sides of the aisle. We're looking forward to the governor's approval of it. It's not the only answer to the housing issues that are confronting our communities, but it is an important one nonetheless, and it will be focused mainly on multifamily type housing that is intended primarily for lower and moderate income individuals. So we're looking forward again to the governor's approval of that legislation. In the area of infrastructure, and here's where the city and county may diverge a little bit just because of our differing needs. From the city's perspective, if there was anything that we were more concerned about, it was not so much funding specifically for the city, for city projects, but rather support for Great Falls College MSU's expansion of facilities for its dental hygiene program. And at least as of today, I'm pleased to report that that proposal is one that will be funded by the legislature. It has the governor's support, and we look forward to that as a real added plus in our community over the next few years. This is a tremendous program if you're not really familiar with it. It provides a wonderful educational opportunity to people who are interested in the dental hygiene field. Lord knows we need more of them out there, and the good news is the pay is good, as well as the job being a very worthwhile and fulfilling one. So we're pleased that our community is finally being blessed with some recognition of the importance of that type of infrastructure change and what it can do for our community. A couple more things, and then I'll let Jane have the floor. Both of us want to talk a little bit again about what we see as potentially negative changes or impacts to what is oftentimes called the entitlement program. To recap, back in 2001, the legislature came up with a plan whereby they would agree to collect a number of local taxes that were collected in cities and counties throughout the state, collect all those monies, and then rebate them to the various cities and towns on a formulaic basis. It was felt that this would be more efficient. It would also result in a better distribution of these dollars, recognizing that sometimes people who are paying the tax in the city don't reside in your city, for example. That's a program that has worked very well for cities and counties over the last several years. It's worked well because without those dollars, your cities and counties would not be able to fund essential public services at the levels that we're providing. As both Jane and I and Joe have also explained and expressed over and over again, the amount of monies that are raised by property taxes in your communities are not enough to fund even your basic level of public services. Without those dollars returning to the community through that program, we would not be able to have the type of police force we have, or the sheriff's department, or the type of fire departments that we have. We could certainly use more, but the fact that that program is in place is critical. Unfortunately, over the last few sessions, some members of the legislature have viewed the entitlement program as essentially a pot of money to raid, to use to fund other types of programs that have virtually no connection to local government services. The biggest concern this session is that some legislators viewed that pot of money as a way to provide additional funding to the State Office of Public Defender, which provides for the various public defender services in all the judicial districts. You've heard us say before, Commissioner Briggs and I talked about it at your last meeting, that it's really problematic when you tell local governments that we're going to raid this money because we think that your local ordinances are adding to the burdens of the public defenders, when there's absolutely no proof whatsoever that that's the case. And that in fact, the OPD program has essentially sold these legislators a bill of goods in trying to claim that they need those monies in order to support that program. Cities and counties have been willing to work with the legislature to say, look, if it's a real problem, let's not make that determination here on the spot in a hurry. Let's study the issue. We have interim committees in the legislature that are more than capable of looking at that issue to see if in fact it's a real problem. Well, up through at least today, we've been pretty successful at beating back those efforts. But an hour ago, though, before I came to this session, I was talking to one of our lobbyists with the League. And yet another attempt is going to be made tomorrow morning to try and get some of those monies taken away from the entitlement program, again, to put into funding the Office of Public Defender. We're going to continue to resist that. Hopefully it will not pass. If it does pass, fully expect us to go to the governor and ask for a line item veto. Because if those monies are taken away from cities and counties, the negative impact is felt everywhere. In Great Falls, we'll figure out a way to adjust, and it won't be a nice way. But what I worry more are in the rural areas, in our smaller counties population-wise, where they depend on those monies for the funding of some very minimal public services. Jane will attest to this, that we had a lot of county commissioners from our rural counties that were pretty upset when this proposal was first advanced about a month or two ago. And they had the opportunity to tell legislators face to face, do not do this. Do not make our jobs back home impossible. Or if you do, you can come back to our communities and you can tell me which public works employee I'm going to fire because we can't afford to fund the services. You're going to tell me what equipment we're not going to be able to purchase this year to replace aging equipment and supplies in our public works departments. But that's what it's getting down to, folks, is that we continue to fight this battle, despite the fact in the minds of most of us that a promise was made back in 2001 that this program would remain sacrosanct and it would be there for the benefit of financing essential public services in our cities and counties. As I pointed out, and Commissioner Briggs pointed out in our last meeting, this is another example of what term limits has done to us in terms of robbing the institutional memory of those people who traditionally were around in the past, remembered those promises, and remembered why those promises were made and why they were so important. With that, I'm going to now turn the microphone over to Commissioner Weber, and she'll talk about a few issues of particular interest to the county.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to bounce around a little bit because I have presented you several bills early on in the session. I want to give you some status updates of where they are right now. So I'll start back with the infrastructure bill that Bill was talking about, that he said the county may have some different reasons for supporting it. We supported the infrastructure bill as a county, and we do support the dental hygiene program. We think that's extremely important. But also in that bonding combination bill, there are opportunities for our water and sewer districts. And Black Eagle has a submission on that to do a project for their water and sewer district. So we supported that bill. Sometimes it's different reasons, but we both, city and county, supported it. Now I'm going to talk just briefly about entitlement because Bill's covered it pretty well. But I want you to understand, there was a bill that was House Bill 773. And that was the one that we actually opposed very strongly with the counties. We effectively have that one tabled indefinitely, but that doesn't mean it couldn't raise its ugly head yet this week. But what Bill's talking about is there are two bills that are going to be discussed tomorrow. One at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's Senate Bill 352. And this is a special, what they call, free conference committee. So it means they can devise and do anything they want. And so we think that they're going to read the entitlement in that committee tomorrow. Fred Thomas chairs that committee. Ryan Osmundson's on it. John Sesso's on it. Glim is on it. Balance is on it. And Lynch is on it. So there's only two Democrats on it, Sesso and Lynch. And they are meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. There's yet another hearing tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's for House Bill 715, again, a free conference committee appointed by leadership. The names are going to sound familiar. Ryan Osmundson is chairing this one, and Sesso is on it, and Smith is on it, Glim is on it, Lynch is on it, and Lou Jones is on it. And so these conference committees essentially go right to third reading. So they go right to third reading with the floor, and then they go right over to the opposite side. And so they are not working on an amendment from a previous bill. They have free reign. And so that's why we're very concerned about what could happen tomorrow. And we're going to be watching that pretty darn closely. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about the Board of Health. If you recall, there were 3 bills that the Board of Health, which is a city-county Board of Health, we're watching very closely. We had success on 2 of them and failed on 1 of them. And so I'll talk about the failure one first. That's House Bill 644. And if you recall, that was having a private cigar club that you could have. And in Missoula, if you recall, they did that in a building where they had the Missoula Children's Museum, and the smoke infiltrated in that building down to the Children's Museum, and the cigar club owner would not change that, and they actually closed the Missoula Children's Museum. And so they just could not have that smoke where they were having children. That, we failed on that one. That one went through. And so that has gone through and will go to the governor. The other one that we actually succeeded on, and excuse me, I used the wrong number on that one. That was House Bill 481. House Bill 644 was to do a cigar endorsement in an all beverage liquor license place. So any of our bars could have a cigar endorsement and have a cigar place attached to their bar, or a separate structure outside with their bar. And that's House Bill 644. That one failed. So we're happy to see that one fail. The other one was Senate Bill 179. And that one was the bill that said that the boards of health did not have the authority to create any clarifying additional regulations, resolutions related to the Clean Indoor Air Act. And so, as you know, you may not know, but Missoula and Yellowstone County and Lewis and Clark County and Cascade County have created additional clarification language. In Cascade County, it helps define what a smoking shack is and what a legitimate smoking shack is. And as you may know or may not know, the Board of Health in Cascade County's Board of Health is in a lawsuit over some establishments who have smoking shacks that we do not believe meet the resolution requirements. So I'll just give you a quick one, and it's not that I'm endorsing a bar, but the city bar, most of us go to the city bar right down the street. If you've ever noticed their smoking shack, it's a 3-sided glass structure that's totally open on one side. It's not attached to the building, it's outside the building. That's a totally legitimate smoking shack. And so that's kind of the model that I use for legitimate ones. So anyway, that bill also got tabled in House Local Government. So we succeeded on that bill too. So that we're gonna proceed forward with our lawsuit. We're actually going to the Supreme Court on the lawsuit that we have with a local establishment here in Great Falls. So I do want you to know that the Board of Health though actually sent a letter to the governor and asked him to veto if any of these three had passed. And so the one that is allowing the cigar bars, private social clubs, that did go through. We're hoping that he will actually veto that one. So now I'm going to just give you a couple others that we're watching. Senate Bill 161 was Tom Jacobson, and that was to allow folks to have dual placement on elected positions when it was a fire service board of trustees and a water sewer district. So like a community in Black Eagle, those are elected and you can't serve on 2 elected positions. He specifically limited it just to water and sewer boards and fire boards. And unfortunately that one failed. We were hoping that one would go through. The other one that failed that we were endorsing was Senate Bill 29, which was the workers' compensation bill for firefighters. Different than the bill that was discussed earlier tonight. There are many rural fire companies, whether they're a fire fee service area or a fire district, that do not have workers' comp for their firefighters. And those are volunteers. If they get injured, they are totally on their own. I truly believe that that's a travesty. Those fire companies receive a fire assessment from the counties, which is an assessment on our rural habitable structures in Cascade County that they receive. And I'm happy to say that in Cascade County, every one of your rural fire fee service areas and fire districts has workers' comp for their firefighters. They make that choice, and they made that choice with our fire companies to say this is important. So they take that money that comes to them from their fire assessment that the county gives to them on a monthly basis. We give them a check, and they make that a priority. So we wanted to demonstrate when we testified in favor of this bill that it's not overly expensive to get workers' comp for your firefighters, but we just have some fire companies that simply just don't do it. Unfortunately, that one was in House Judiciary, and as most people know, that's the kill committee. And so that did not get out of committee. Another one that passed, though, was a good one, was which was House Bill 15. And this was an act that helped us with our county motor vehicle recycling and disposal laws. So it allows the county to dispose of non-motorized vehicles and mobile homes that are really a public nuisance. That one passed, and we were in support of that. Another one that passed was House Bill 105, which was reciprocity for practitioners that are licensed in other states. So that was a real goal for our military spouses who came into our area that had some kind of a professional license to not have to go through all the steps that might take them a year to get licensed in Montana, but they would, unless they have a negative record from a previous state that they came from, they could be licensed here in Montana. So that's a good thing. The other one is this might seem small to you, but House Bill 190, which was an act for us to allow a local authority to set speed limits in a school zone or near a senior center without an engineering and traffic investigation. When MDT does those, it can take a very long time to get that investigation done. And we have found that sometimes because they are watching people driving through these areas, sometimes the speed limit, they say, goes up instead of down. So now we have the authority. And let me give you an example. The Ulm School is on a road that could be traveled pretty quickly. And so that gives us the authority to help keep that speed limit down. The other one that was tabled in committee is Senate Bill 224, and this was Tom Jacobson's bill, and he was the sponsor. And this was revising laws governing highway encroachments and increasing the fine for failure to remove. Again, this one's more of a county one. People sometimes go out and put a gate across a county road. And you can ask them to take it down, and they won't take it down, and it's really a public road, and they were fined so little, they didn't care. And so Tom tried to increase that fine so that we would have a little teeth to get them out. The other one that Jasmine Krotkov carried for us, and we asked her to carry this one, is you'll remember that we had, and this is House Bill 299, in the counties when we wanted an intercap loan, and that is really low interest loans that we can have in the county, which we borrowed money for use for the courthouse roof, very low interest rates. There was a provision in the original legislation that did not allow you to get more than $250,000 of an intercap loan for roads. And anytime you're paving a road, $250,000 is nothing. And so you don't even go through the rigmarole to try to get it. So she changed the language in that and removed it. So we'll be able to go as counties and go ask, and it will actually help the city too, go ask for intercap loans for major road improvements. Let me just give you a couple more and then I'll quit because we're getting close to the time that we want to have our folks from the school district up here. You might remember House Bill 574 and 575. Both of these were killed, and we are so happy that these were killed because these were provisions about immunizations. And you may have watched the news. Casey Schreiner did a very fine job when it came on the floor on the House, and there was some very, in my opinion, damaging dialogue that was going on, and he put that person in their place. But 574 would have invalidated the requirement of a person who has foster children to if their religion said, we don't believe in immunizations, so we have a foster child in our care, we're not immunizing them. That's what that bill would have done. It failed, thank goodness. And 575 related to immunizations also. That bill would have allowed daycare centers not to require their workers or the children that they take into care in their daycare center to have been immunized. And as we all know, herd immunization is what prevents measles from coming back into our communities, as we have seen in the papers out in the state of Washington and we've seen in New York. So we are very happy that both of those failed. And then the only other one that I will say that we were disappointed in because it passed was Senate Bill 26. And Senate Bill 26, in the original legislation, the Supreme Court was to pay for travel costs for special witnesses that come, and we bring special witnesses into Cascade County for child abuse cases on a regular basis. The court system, the court administrator had not been paying us, and we were putting the pressure on them to help pay and defer some of the costs that happen when we go to court for child abuse cases. This bill was actually sponsored by Steve Fitzpatrick, and it did pass, and they changed it because it was going to remove that requirement totally so that the state did not have to help us pay for those costs. Now they just switched the language that says the AG may pay for those costs, which we are assuming he never will. So, but at least it didn't expunge it totally. And the last one I will say is we in Cascade County and in MACO, the Montana Association of County Officials, are thrilled that Medicaid expansion passed 658. I will say that I was personally disappointed that Brian Hoven and Lola Galloway did not vote for that bill locally. And that's a shame. That's an important bill for our state. And that is a job creator for our state, as well as providing opportunities for folks to have preventative medicine and healthcare. So that's all I have. And I think we're right on time, Jerry.
Well,
I don't know if you want to let anybody ask any questions, but
I think we could have a couple questions. Does anyone have a burning question?
I just have a
Gary? Yeah, go up to the mic, please.
I think the comment is appropriate. I'm sure that it will be said.
I didn't turn it off. It's must
There we
be on.
Many times in the next 8 months, but Bill Bronson has done such an invaluable service for the City Commission in lobbying Low these many years at the legislature. His knowledge has a depth that is really unrivaled in the state, and it's going to leave a real gap on the commission. So thank you, Bill, for your service.